The following program contains discussions on sensitive topics, including sexual assault, which may be triggering or distressing for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. If you or someone you know has been affected by sexual assault, help is available. Please contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE or visit www.rain.org for support and resources.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to DETV Every Woman. I am your host, Dr. Sheree Paramore, a licensed therapist of mental health. And today we're going to be discussing a topic that is concerning not just to Delaware girls and women, but women all across the United States of America. And with that being said, I'm going to introduce our first panelist. This is Jill.
Hi, Dr. Dawn. My name is Jill Slader Young. I am a founder and executive director of Safe Haven Healing, Inc. We service survivors of rape, sexual assault, and domestic violence. I'm also a contracted therapist for Radiant Path Little Hill, so always on the mission to help lives be better for any and all survivors.
And as a fellow therapist, I'm so glad that you're here because your perspective today is going to be needed. And next, we have none other than Britney. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, Dr. Dawn. My name is Britney Mumford. I serve as the executive director at DelawareCan Action Fund, where we work to ensure that every Delaware student has access to a high-quality education. And a big part to being successful in education is making sure that we are providing them with a secure and safe environment.
Awesome. And with that being said, we're going to be discussing today some sexual assault. With that being said, I do need to make sure that I give a viewer discretion. Some of the topics that we're going to talk about, including this one, we're going to be diving in deep. So I need you as a therapist to please take care of yourself. For those that are in our audience looking at us live, and for those that are tuning in on television, it is very important that you take care of number one, and that is you. So if we go someplace that does not feel safe and you need to check out just for a little bit, please feel free to do so. So with that being said, we're going to jump right in, ladies, and just get started. So one of the things I want to address almost right away, and that is the topic that we're discussing. Now, I have some cue cards here, and I know we're talking about physical violation, but there's also a huge debate as to being able to say things like sexual assault. Like, for example, when you were mentioning that your job, in the title of your job, does say that.
Right.
So I want to hear what you two think about that.
It makes it hard to do outreach, quite frankly. It makes it hard even on social media, because in trying to connect with survivors and find them and let them know who we are and where we're at, we can't say who we are, but we can say where we're at.
Yeah. And a big part is that with the trauma work, I do a lot of trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. We're taught to train our kids. I work with kids that have been raped and molested. So we're taught to teach them anatomically correct names and body parts, and actually saying things like sexual assault, have the child being able to say something like that. And for the victim, that can be very disabling to just say, well, I can't even say what happened.
Right. It's reflective of the culture.
Yeah.
And I think going further, that makes it really difficult for people to report things that happen against them, right? We live in a society where saying the word rape might get videos banned from Facebook or YouTube, right? We can't even talk about the crimes that are committed against us without being silenced, no questions asked. And then we get surprised when women are afraid to come forward about assault. And we've created a society to make them live in fear. It doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense.
No, as a survivor, it feels like you're continually victimized. My rape happened in 1996. And now in 2024, I still can't say, hi, I was raped. Why is that problematic? What should be more problematic is that it happened.
Right.
Not that I talk about.
And the healing that's to follow.
Right.
So for me, I was never raped. I was molested. And it's a very shameful thing, especially if you're coming from different cultures. Like, I'm a Black woman. So to say something like that, it's demoralizing. You're taught, just don't talk about it.
Right.
Because it's considered embarrassment, not just to yourself, but to your family. So we have to move past that. But that's why we're here. You know, we care about Delaware women, Delaware girls, and women all across this country, to be honest. And we have to start talking.
Right.
So one of the other things that because we were sitting on the couch and we were just talking for a little bit, and we were talking about personal space and actually giving consent to do things. And I was just telling you guys, like yesterday, I have a 5-year-old. He's in kindergarten, Spanish immersion program in Delaware. And he came off the bus. He has sensory processing disorder. And so he loves people. He wants to hug them all the time. He doesn't have any malice behind his actions, but it can be off-putting. And, you know, immediately the daycare informed me that the bus aide said, you have to let, you know, this child's mother know that he can't touch other kids. So I immediately got upset. And, you know, I'm like, how am I supposed to train my sensory child in this when that happened in the moment? And I was talking to you, Brittany, and you were stating that you started training your 1.5-year-old to have that autonomy.
So we explained to him that he doesn't have to give hugs or kisses, right? Even to family members. Like, he's at the age where no is his favorite word. And when mommy says, can I have a kiss? And he says, no. I'm like, okay, that's fine. You do you, buddy. But I think in your situation, what you're pointing out is that while that might happen at home, it might not. That's not something we teach kids in school, because we have this idea that talking about consent to young children means that we're talking to them about sex. And obviously, we shouldn't be talking to 5-year-olds necessarily about sex, but we can talk to children about bodily autonomy, right? And that goes beyond consent to sexual activity. That goes, I mean, that's like, don't pull on the sleeve of my sweatshirt. That's bugging me. Those are things that we can ingrain into education and talk to our children about in a really healthy way. And I think society is coming around to that point. There's a huge generational gap, right? But we're getting to the point where that is becoming more normal and more accepted. And that's a good thing. Right. That's a good thing. But I mean, we still can't say rape on YouTube. So that's also a problem. It's just,
well, it's the misconception of what sexual education actually is.
Right.
Sexual education isn't about explicit acts. Sexual education is about ownership of self and personhood. It's consent. Consent is not just in the bedroom. Consent is,
yeah,
hi, Brittany, can I sit here? That's consent.
Yeah.
What's so damaging about teaching children that? I don't understand.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was pregnant, the number of people that, without my permission, touched my belly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the little, excuse me, sir. Like, yes, there is a baby in there, but you're not touching him. You're touching my navel, and my navel doesn't like it. Right.
So when I was pregnant, well, first of all, back up. Before I got pregnant, I was that person. I was that offender.
Mm-hmm.
I would go up and just automatically put my hands on someone's belly and do that until I got pregnant and someone went to reach in to touch me and I flipped out and I was like, don't touch me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to say it that way, but it doesn't feel comfortable to me. And I tried to explain that. But Jill, there's something that you were saying as we were talking on the couch, and you were saying how we should have consent education in schools. And I want you to talk about that a little.
Consent education needs to start at the beginning. That's the first thing. A lot of what's given to children about consent is usually junior high, high school.
Okay, it's too late.
Maybe a very small dose. And then like freshman week, you know, if you're lucky enough to go to college, freshman week, they'll talk about consent for 5 minutes during the freshman orientation. They'll tell you where the emergency phones are and where their services are in case anything goes wrong. So now you've heard about consent for maybe a total of maybe an hour out of your 12 years plus of education. And now we're supposed to think that you know what to do or what that means.
Yes.
Consent should be a spelling word. Consent should be built into the lexicon of educators. It should be a word that teachers use on the regular. It should be something introduced in early childhood. It should be introduced in daycares.
I was going to ask, how early do we do this? Because like with me, I teach my son anatomically correct names now. Like he knew what his body parts were when he was 2. So when like you said, daycare, and I actually agree with you. So when do you think is early enough for us to have these conversations that parents are even uncomfortable having?
At the very beginning. when an infant comes to a center. I spent 26 years in education. I was lucky enough to find Montessori ed, and I dove in really deep and leaned in really hard to that. And I built a lot of consent curriculum within that realm because it was possible, because of how things were formatted. And from the very beginning, I would pull parents in and talk to them about what consent meant and what personhood meant, and that they needed their babies to have that idea of personhood,
Right.
that they were separate, as it was also good for the mental health of the mother. Like we've all stated, when you're pregnant and people are touching you, you start to feel this bond, and the bond is natural and it's good. But you also have to hold on to the fact that you are you.
Right.
If you had children, it did not magically change. You're still Britney.
Right.
You're still Dr. Dawn. But now you're also Mom. But those are two different people. Those are two different her. And they both need to exist. And in order to do that, we need to encourage children to have their own autonomy from the beginning. So then the idea is the exchanges should be just as respectful as we would want them to be as adults.
Right.
Just the other day, my husband and I were in Longwood Gardens, and we were walking by, and this small child was screaming. And I looked very naturally, just following the sound, and her parents were changing her clothes in front of everyone for a picture. And I, because of what I do for a living, I just naturally turned to my husband and I said, now imagine I brought you here to Longwood Gardens and I ripped your shirt off.
Right.
And told you had to change. How would you react to me? That child was completely justified in their reaction. They weren't being bad. They weren't throwing a fit. They were upset because something was happening to them in an environment where it shouldn't have been happening.
They end up at home.
So going back to your question, in these centers, in these schools, in these facilities, changing diapers should be associated with a bathroom, because it's about going to the bathroom
And privacy.
and they should be a part of it. So even if that's an infant holding the diaper while you're undoing things and you're having a conversation with them, you're modeling what's expected from the beginning, that they're involved in the process and you're doing something with them, not to that.
Right.
And then as soon as a child can stand, there is no reason to take them and physically lay them down and take their clothes off. We're going to let them stand. We're going to do a standing change in a bathroom near a toilet. And as moms, this is great because it makes toilet training so much easier. Right? You've already built the association. So it's like a 2-for-1.
Right. So I love this because I'm getting educated a little bit. I'm going to take all these things how I think. So I know I do want to shift it back to you, Brittany, because I was saying I am so embarrassed, like what happened yesterday, because it's not even been 24 hours now, and I'm having these conversations with my 5-year-old son with sensory issues, saying, let's do fist bumps and leave with, hugs from mom and dad, where, that's not even 24 hours, where you stated, you saw something on social media. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I saw a girlfriend of mine from college. She has 3 daughters, lives in North Carolina. Probably won't watch this, but if you do, hi, Caroline. Peace. And she had made a post about how it was really difficult with her older relatives because they live in a more conservative part of North Carolina that were upset with how she was raising their daughters to say no to giving goodbye hugs and goodbye kisses, because she's teaching them, like, you decide when you give affection to someone, your body is your body.
Right.
And you make that decision. And I was like, wow. Oh man, like I'd never really thought about it that way. And I wasn't even pregnant yet. And it changed the dynamic in which we think about it. And it absolutely stuck with me. And I told my husband, I was like, hey, when we have kids, we're going to do this. And he's like, yeah, sure. Okay. I mean, basically what mom says goes in our house. But like, there's so many other things that we do with young children, especially, we force little girls to give affection when they don't want to, much more than we do little boys.
Yeah.
We teach little girls that if a boy hits you on the playground, it's because he likes you. But we teach little girls to accept things instead of raising sons that won't do those things. And it's getting you to go, I can see you. That's just where one of the things I think is one of the biggest parts of my job as a mom is to raise a little boy to raise a man who is a true asset to society, who is a defender of women, who understands these things. Because we have so many men in power who just, for one reason or another, either didn't learn it or didn't care. And we've created this societal acceptance of behaviors that we couldn't address at a very young age.
Right. So I see your tears.
Sorry, talking about my son always makes me, no, he's like my little best buddy. And I always hope I'm doing him right. So
no, but so one of the things about DHEV is that we like to connect to the everyday woman. And I need the audience to understand like where those tears are coming from, because right now you have a mic on and you can advocate in ways that most women can't. So tell them where that's coming from.
It's coming from, partially what you said earlier. You thought that you had failed your side.
I did. Yes.
Well, we question ourselves and we're doing the best that we can as moms. And being a mom is really hard. And we question ourselves and we are questioned by society, by our partners, by our friends constantly because we're trying so hard. We're doing the best that we can. Having conversations like these publicly is so important to raising the next generation, right? And it's hard, but we've got to do it. We have to step up. And I love my parents. I love the boomer generation, but they did a better job than the generation before them. We have to do a better job than they did. And we have to make sure that this perpetual cycle of assault and diminishing. And to be clear, like while it is a crime that predominantly affects women, there are absolutely men that are victims of sexual assault, that are victims of rape. We have to stop creating a society that accepts rape culture. And it starts when children are very young.
It does, right? So I want to first thank you for being vulnerable. I know that our viewing audience appreciates that because, your tears were not in vain. You connected with some woman today that was able to say, like, those are my tears, but I didn't feel comfortable crying them. And you just gave her permission to do it.
So I also cry at Hallmark commercials. So to be clear, I'm a very emotional person.
But that actually takes us into the next part of our conversation. Like, we're in a very crucial political battle right now where women and their bodies are on the ballot, not just in this great state of Delaware, but all across the United States of America. We're getting ready to literally go to a poll and cast a vote to decide what we're going to do with our bodies. I want to open this up to the both of you, whoever wants to take it, to see what your thoughts are about this and, anything that gets your goat in this particular way that you have an opportunity to kind of say it now.
Well, Brittany, going with what you were saying, it is kind of a law. Yep, we're to navigate all of these spaces. But the fault, if you will, is in that rape culture that you're alluding to. The fault is in the system.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we have been victimized by a system that has led generations before us and created poor practices that unfortunately we're trying to recover from.
That became unnecessary practices and procedures.
Exactly.
And you need to get away with it.
Exactly. Because it was accepted as the norm. Now, Dr. Dawn, what normal really means. There's no such thing as really, there's no normal as we conceive it as a society.
Right.
Normal just means it happens often.
Yeah.
We could say sexual violence is normal.
It's not.
Exactly. And it shouldn't be. So we really need to look at where these things are coming from, why women have been taught to accept certain behaviors and men haven't been taught to curb certain behaviors, and why some language is accepted and why some language isn't accepted. This is a much bigger issue. It's a global issue.
It is.
So when we look at it through that lens, where can we make the change? It really comes down to education.
It does.
It's educating our children. It's educating parents. It's educating legislators.
Yes. So let's get into it.
People, humans need to understand that consent is based on two people having mutual respect and having an understanding and giving permission.
Keyword, understanding, meaning that some people, like young people under the age of 18, may not possess the understanding.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we get into power dynamics.
Yep.
Power dynamics come into play. Rape is rape.
Full stop.
Laws are created to protect individuals who are vulnerable. When you take any form of rape, and actually, let me back this up. Sexual assault and rape are two different animals.
They are. And thank you for saying that.
To use them interchangeably, especially if you are a legislator, is a no-no. Because sexual assault's the umbrella.
Yeah.
Rape is an offense that lives under it.
Yeah.
They are not interchangeable. They do not mean the same thing.
Right.
And then when you get into, well, one rape might be okay and the other one isn't acceptable, we get into this misconception of what consent is about. Consent is not the absence of violence.
Yes. Yeah.
Let me repeat that. Consent is not the absence of violence. Just because violence didn't occur doesn't mean a crime wasn't committed.
So I am a prevention scientist, but there was a part of me that did some legal stuff back in the day. So I am going to go into something more that you said, right? That not every single sexual assault are measured the same, right? So let's get into it. And specifically, we're talking about statutory rape. That's the term that is used. And for those who do not know what that is, it is a young person who has sexual relations with someone that is much older than them. Now, we just talked about a child under the age of 18, even sometimes in their early 20s, not quite having everything formed just right so they can make sound decisions, right? So with that being said, if you engage in sexual activity with someone and you're not quite understanding what it is, that's called statutory rape.
Right.
So that's no different.
Because you cannot give consent.
Right.
And when you have a sitting state representative go on the House floor and say a 31-year-old person and a 17-year-old person have had consensual sex, even though it might not be using the word consent properly, that is not consensual. That person cannot give consent. It is very clear in law and should be made more clear in society. They cannot give consent. And you hear that often. Well, statutory rape, like she wanted to. Like, stop. We are accepting and making excuses of very real and serious crimes. You are saying with that statement that their trauma is probably not as bad, they'll get over it. They wanted to. And it's vulgar. It's mind-blowing. I know women that this happened to in high school. It destroys you as a person.
Yeah.
It makes you question your own ability to make decisions. And to have someone put you in a situation like that, as an adult, that person is a predator.
Yeah.
And we should not be making excuses or apologies for that person.
Agree.
It's mind-blowing to me that we have people in 2024, especially elected officials, that don't seem to grasp this concept.
But we go back to, again, that rape culture, that systemic issue. And we have issues with pedophilia. We have issues with sex trafficking.
Absolutely.
These exist because some of these beliefs are accepted as okay, that this is normal.
And just so people know, a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of the work I do is working with victims who have been assaulted in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And what most people don't understand, and I have been guilty of the same thing, if I'm put in a very uncomfortable situation in a sexual nature, I tend to giggle and it comes across like, oh, she likes it. It's just that, but for me, it's reminding me of what happened to me in the past. And I try to minimize it by giggling, but that doesn't mean that I want it. It just means that I'm uncomfortable. I don't know how to handle it. My brain is trying to process. It's in fight or flight. And I'm like, okay, I need to survive. So I'm going to giggle. Maybe if I do that, it'll take things away, but that doesn't mean that I want to do so.
And Dr. Dawn, in touching on that, we're humans. We don't come with an ownership manual.
No.
That fight or flight isn't just fight or flight. It's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Yes.
The giggling is fawning.
Yeah. You just gave me chills.
It's there for survival purposes. But if we don't know enough about ourselves, we don't understand what's actually happening.
But for a lot of victims, they don't feel that they will be heard. And so it's like, why should I say something and risk myself being put out to the wolves and someone destroying me when I'm not going to be believed? Yeah. So that's a problem.
It's a real problem. And unfortunately, I would love to say things are shifting and changing, and they might be at an inchworm's pace.
Right.
But when I look at the statistics and I look at what's actually been going on, I don't like to say it'll be almost 30 years since I've been assaulted, because we give away our age, right? But the numbers haven't shifted.
No.
The methods haven't changed. I mean, outcomes haven't changed. The methods of treatment of survivors hasn't changed.
Right.
If I gave specifics of my story, there is someone else who just had the same thing happen to them yesterday.
Yes. So according to RAIN, which stands for Rape, Abuse, Incest, and National Network, the highest risk years for a physical violation or rape are the ages 12 to 34. 12. So think about that. That's middle school. And in some of the kiddos that I work with 5-year-olds that have been raped. That didn't even cover them.
That's horrifying. I didn't know that statistic.
Well, now you understand why the education is so important.
Yes.
Start at the very beginning, because they need to protect themselves. And on the flip side, everyone needs to understand what conducting themselves properly actually means.
Yeah.
What mutual respect actually means.
Yeah.
What consent actually means. And that's the only way we're going to be able to deconstruct this rape culture that we're all living in.
So I want to address, I told you guys know I have a 5-year-old little boy. And, my biggest fear is him being in a situation where it is consensual, and then the young lady then makes it up. So with that being said, I work in a school system where we had a young lady that did consent to sexual activity with a same person of her age, and she ended up getting pregnant. Needless to say, she was scared. And it's like, my parents are going to kill me. What am I going to do? What I'm going to do? So she thought, okay, I'm just going to say that he raped me. Well, then, of course, the police got involved and they started doing their investigation, and they learned that it was falsified. Luckily for the young man, there's no luck in on any of this, but he taped it, not the act itself, but just her saying that, because he was really trying to capture the whole "I love you" kind of thing, that kind of thing. So he was able to produce that, and there were some other text messages and other people that were able to be witnesses. But that's scary to me as a mom of a 5-year-old with sensory issues, where, he is loving and trying to, hug everybody, and he doesn't mean anything, by his actions. But if I had a little girl, I would be like, get that little boy off my daughter. I mean, if I were flipping it,
Sure. I mean, I think part of it too, though, is we've demonized sex for women.
we have.
Women are not. I remember, and just a little bit anecdotally, I waited to take health class in high school until my senior year. It was a half-credit course. Why did I wait till senior year? I don't know. So I was 18 by the time I was taking health class, and the person came in to talk to us about sex education. One day, by the way, we got one day on sex education. And she said, give me reasons that people have sex in high school. And it was, your friends are pressuring you to, you don't know that, like all of these ridiculous reasons. And I raised my hand and I said, how about because you want to?
Or it feels good.
I was like, how about because I want to?
Right.
Apparently that was the wrong answer. And I got sent to the principal's office. Like we had demonized sex.
You got sent to the
I got sent to the principal's office and I was like, not sorry.
Right.
Sorry, not sorry.
Right.
What did I say that was wrong? Like, please tell me. My principal was like, Brittany, you always just like push the envelope, which I notoriously do, right? I probably was just trying to get a rise out of people, but I was also correct.
Right.
Right? We demonize sex as well. And while we should certainly not be encouraging sex in minors and in children, we also have to create a world and educate them on what sex is and when it is consensual and when it is something that you want to do with another person that you are not pressured into, etc. Like, it's not a dirty thing, right?
Right.
This girl was afraid that her parents would find out she had sex.
And that she knew she could weaponize it.
And and why do we do that?
Right.
Why do, I mean, when his parents found out that he had sex, he wasn't going to accuse her of raping him because his parents were going to say, darn, boys will be boys. Johnny was just being Johnny, you know?
And the girl's job is to gatekeep.
Exactly.
Right.
It's my responsibility to lock my chastity belt, right? But it's this double standard that we've created, right? And that makes me so angry. It also frustrates me hearing that women weaponize sex as a survivor of sexual assault. I don't think I'm allowed to say the words I want to say. Like, it's very frustrating. It makes me very angry because you, at the same time, are making light of a situation that is very real for millions of women.
Right.
But it also colors the lens.
For sure.
Because I distinctly remember walking into the police station and I was black and blue. And the first question I got from the officer was it a black male?
Oh.
Now, this is my best friend who was black and male at the time was the one who took me to the police station to help me.
That's a whole...
So number one, that's a whole nother show. We won't go there. And then the next question was if I liked rough sex.
Oh.
Why would that be a question that a police officer would pose to a woman? I was 19, coming into a police station to look for help. From those first two questions, I knew this was not going to be helpful. I knew this wasn't going anywhere. I knew this process was going to be a whole nother assault. And I walked out. And I never got justice. Because from the beginning, this lens colored their world.
Brett. Now, I do need to address, like you were talking from a place of strength. There's a woman possibly watching right now, whether it be in the audience or on TV, that's looking at you and you're coming from a place of strength. But that 19-year-old you did not have that same resolve that you have right now.
That was a young college woman who thought she was doing all the right things and also was affected by the perception that rape is a stranger who jumps out of the bushes and assaults you. The reality is the vast majority of rapes that occur, it's somebody you know.
Yeah. Which is why I teach anatomically correct names, because most people would not use those names. They might say cookie or kitty or whatever the names that they use. And
that's utilized by perpetrators.
Yep. 1000%. So I do need to just pause for a moment because we are diving in pretty deep. And I want to make sure that for the viewers out there that you understand that one of the resources that we want to give you is the National Sexual Assault Hotline. And that number is 1-800-656-HOPE, which is 4673. Again, that's 1-800-656-HOPE, 4673. And you can call that number and they are trained professionals on the other end, making sure that they can direct you to the right place. And I've never had to call the hotline, but I would assume that they would walk you through every single step in terms of like making a police report and even setting you up with therapy and things of that nature.
And these conversations are so important. Going back to a lot of the topics we've touched on.
Yeah.
You don't know until you know, right?
Right.
You didn't know before you were pregnant how invasive it would feel for someone to touch your belly.
I'll never do it again.
You don't know until you have this child in front of you and you're like, oh, you shouldn't be forced to hug someone. You don't know until it's happened to you, all the holes in the system. So those of us who know, those of us who have that knowledge, it's our responsibility to then say, what needs to be done and address what needs to be done. And that's why we're talking so much about education and reforming our culture and ways to affect change so that these things don't keep happening.
So as we start, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, and I want to take it back to our state legislator, right?
The love that dare not speak their names.
Right. When given the opportunity to learn and be better, we should do so. Know what you don't know is extremely important. When this state legislator was confronted with their comments, which included it's not rape the way in which we think of it, or misconstruing of the meaning of consent, when given the opportunity to address those comments in the media, their response was, I didn't realize my comments would be so triggering. I'm sorry if they were offensive to people. I guess I didn't say what I was trying to say very well. By the way, I voted for a lot of sexual assault survivor bills. See, I'm really good on this issue. That is not an apology. You had an opportunity to say, you know what, I was wrong. This is what consent means. I did not mean to imply that a 17-year-old could give consent to sexual activity. You had an opportunity to be very clear about what you meant, and you didn't do that, right? So let's do better. When we have the chance to learn and do better, clarify, reflect internally, do so.
Right. And it's okay to say that you don't know, right? That's how we learn. Like there's some things that I do and I don't know. So as we start to wrap up, I definitely want to hear from, each of you in terms of like what you want the audience to take away. But I do want to remind the audience, we are in the midst of an election season in Delaware. In fact, in the state of Delaware, we have already started early voting. I did, like literally 2 days ago. You did as well? Yay. So if you can go vote now, but just please, I strongly urge you to make sure you understand and know the topics for which you are voting. Know the people that are possibly going ahead of you to represent you, because it's not going to be you standing in those forums. It's going to be them. And you have to put your faith or your vote into this person that's going to speak for you. So if these are topics or the things that we talked about and you agree with what we were saying today, I strongly urge you to do your research. Look up every single politician in the state of Delaware. We're voting. Look them up before you vote so that you can make an informed decision. So I want to turn it over to you, Jill, so you can address our audience as we wrap out. And then I'm going to go over to you, Brittany.
I think it's just very important, like you said, to educate yourself and to take a moment to really know who you're voting for.
Yes.
And make sure that there are people in power who truly represent your best interests, who are going to protect the vulnerable, who are going to look for equity, who are going to look for inclusion, who are going to look to defend our personhood. We have a right to ownership of self. We own our vessel. Our vessel is ours. We come into this world with it and we leave with it. It is no one else's. And we, unfortunately, have some laws out there that tell us otherwise.
Right.
And then we wonder why these beliefs are held in place. It's because we're living in a world that says it's okay that we don't own our bodies. And that's a problem. And we have to find solutions.
Jill. I'm Brittany.
No worries. I can be Jill. I think she's great.
I was thinking Britney Spears.
I would end with words matter, especially when we're talking about children. Teaching starts with words. When we're talking about children, words matter. When people tell you who they are, believe that. We are potentially, very likely, at the cusp of electing a woman for the first time. I might cry again. to the highest office in the United States of America. And we are very likely electing a woman to Senate from the state of Delaware, a woman to Congress from the state of Delaware for the first time. And it's really alluring to pat ourselves on the back and say, like, good job, guys. Well done. Look at all those women up there. But what we say about those women, what we say about crimes against women matter. Just putting women in places of power is not enough. Defending them is important. Making sure that they are protected and empowered is important. So words matter. Yeah. It's really that simple.
So ladies, I want to thank you both for joining us on DETV Every Woman. Your perspective really is going to help so many out there. So thank you for taking the time and coming. I'm Dr. Dawn Sheree. I just want to remind you, please follow us on all social media platforms. We can be found at DETV. Make sure that you like, subscribe, so you can be abreast of all the news that's coming up in DTV world. So thank you so much. I'm Dawn Paramore, Dr. Dawn Sheree, and I'm signing out.